Wang reply to Vice-prefect Zhang. These last few years, I search for quietude. Worldly concerns no longer trouble me. I've made myself no long-term strategy, but instinct guides me back to these old woods. I ease my belt in fresh pine breezes, play my lute to the mountain moon. You question me on failure and success. The song of a fisherman drifts across the bay. So here we are with yet another of Wang's poems, and as is usual in all the pentasyllabic regulated poems we've been reading of his so far, the topic of this poem is the retired life. There isn't a lot of nature description. There's a little bit of nature description in it because the poetic persona is situated in a natural place in the old woods where he enjoys the breeze and where he plays his musical instrument under the moon. But basically the main topic of this poem is the retired life and its contrast with the official life. So this is a poem, this is a reply written to a vice-prefect. I don't know who this vice-prefect Zhang was. Not a very important position, that of vice-prefect, a lower middle member of the bureaucracy, but clearly it was somebody who was still in office and therefore still part of the world. This is pretty obvious when we see, as we will comment later on, the questions that he must have made to Wang in the text that generated this poem as an answer. So, as opposed to that person, to this vice-prefect Zhang, who is still immersed in the nets of worldly life, in the red dust of ambition and power and glory, Wang has renounced to that sort of life, to that sort of mentality. This is probably a poem, well, he wrote poems like this all his life, but it would very appropriately fit his last years of life when he spent more time in retirement than in office, really. And when he assumed Buddhist thought, especially Chan Buddhist thought. Now, a key idea that we can see in Wang's thought and in his poetry is emptiness, shunyata, which is a key Buddhist concept. So emptiness is positive from the Buddhist perspective. One must empty oneself of subjectivity. That is probably the reason why a lot of Wang poems include a description of nature where no human presence or no human subjective feeling seems to press on or to impose himself on the landscape. The Buddhist and the Taoist ideal is an extinction of the self, an extinction of subjectivity, an emptying of oneself from social conventions, from reason, from the traps of language, so that one might reach ultimate truth and harmony. So empty forests, empty lakes, empty minds frequently appear in Wang poems. The empty knowledge, I think, is one of the phrases that is used in this poem. It doesn't appear in the translation, but it was in the original, and it points at this, at valuing empty knowledge being the knowledge that has been emptied of worldly ambition, of rationality, of a means and end sort of mentality. It's just pure empty knowledge without any tinge of self-interest or subjectivism. So the retired life that is represented in this and other poems by Wang is not just, you mustn't focus it as, or you mustn't read it as, or at least not exclusively, as, the life of ease and comfort of the Eastern Epicurean, so a person with a philosophical mindset who decides that the best life for maximizing pleasure is, enjoying a retired life away from power and ambition and just enjoying simple pleasures, simple food, free time, reading. There is an element of that, but there is an element that transcends that. There's also a religious element at play here, which emphasizes this escape from the world and the worldly thoughts that must be taken into account with all of Wang poems, and other poets' poems also that talk about the retired life and about renunciation. Okay, as usual, let's take a look at the poem couplet by couplet and comment on any relevant aspects. These last few years I search for quietude. Worldly concerns no longer trouble me. So whenever this poem was composed, the first couplet clearly states that Wang Wei's poetic persona has quitted the world. He has definitely renounced power and glory and ambition. He is no longer interested in those things. In the last few years, he just wants to attain peace of mind, yeah, and to extricate himself completely from worldly concerns, position, office, all those sorts of things that so much worried the minds of Confucian scholars and of ambitious people. Second couplet. I've made myself no long-term strategy, but instinct guides me back to these old woods. So this avoiding long-term strategies connects with what we said before, this empty knowledge. So I'm not, following a plan to achieve a certain material objective. No, I'm just letting the mind roam. I'm trying to empty it from subjectivism and interest. And this empty mindset, this empty mind, seems to lead me to this old forest, to these old woods that he might have lived in or roamed before, there to be able to live the retired life and the ascetic and the meditative life with an adequate background, with no or little disturbance. What does he do in those woods? Third couplet. I ease my belt in fresh pine breezes, play my lute to the mountain moon. So two images of a lack of constraint, of freedom, and of a lack of material or worldly goals. The poet just enjoys the soft, refreshing breeze that blows in the pines. He can, allow his belt, his clothes to loosen up. He no longer has to, be a stuffy Confucian with all the clothes ritually well placed and doubled and in order. And he enjoys music under the moonlight. He plays with the moon as his only listener and public. What better public to have? The last couplet seems to take us back, until now the poet was describing his frame of mind and what he has been doing. In the last couplet, he seems to try to tackle the questions or the problems that were raised by Vice-prefect Zhang in maybe a previous poem or letter. So he says, you question me on failure or success. The song of a fisherman drifts across the bay. So all of this poem has been showing us how detached, how separated, how disgusted by a worldly mind frame Wang Wei is. So, he would feel very surprised by a letter or some words from the vice-prefect emphasizing, hey, worldly topics. Yeah, in other translations, what here is failure of success is represented as, fate, the debate on people in office, are they in office because of their virtue or just because of chance? Worldly concerns. And, Wang Wei is totally uninterested in this. So how does he answer this question on failure or success? He answers it with what looks like a quote. It's in cursive in this translation. The song of a fisherman drifts across the bay. Why does he say this? He's not changing topic. We've already talked about fishermen, images of fishermen before in this anthology. The fisherman represents the retired life, the life completely empty of worries and preoccupations. He is generally painted as a Taoist ideal in some Taoist texts like the Zhang. And I think we commented that there is a prose poem called The Fisherman, included in the anthology Zi, in which a fisherman gives good advice to the scholar official Chu Yuan, who is devastated at not being employed in office, and the fisherman tells him, hey, take things with philosophy, and he gives him an example. When the river is muddy, I wash my feet in it. When the river is clear, I wash my hands and face on it, which is a metaphor. When things are right for serving in office because the ruler is good, be happy to serve. When things are not, don't worry about not serving. Of course, Chu Yuan, who represents the extreme Confucian view, cannot accept this, kills himself. And here Wang Wei, is saying the fisherman is the solution. He is the model. No talk about glory, success, about good luck, bad luck, about destiny. I don't care about all those things. My model is the fisherman. Completely empty mind, completely non-worried about the self, ambitions, power, glory, court offices, enjoying his peaceful life drifting, his song drifting across the bay, his boat, his figure probably drifting along with his song. And that song is a song that calls for emptiness. So, quite a nice poem by Wang Wei as usual. And in his line, this is perhaps not so much descriptive of nature, it's more descriptive of his attitude, his belief, his mindset, and the reasons why he enjoyed and why he pursued the retired life.